According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
They began as 16 singles on a cruise ship headed for Aruba, but only one couple remains at the end.
The anthology, once again, is called The Long Road to Freedom.
Thank you, Katie.
Looks wonderful. Up next, a new look at billionaire Howard Hughes.
Creamy, but no cream added. A little cheese at the end, and wonderful porcini mushrooms.
And the 90s?
You don't have a defined idea of who the enemy is.
From the world's best storytellers.
From poker to Picasso.
Really feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. It was
really?
rock bottom, yeah, rock bottom.
And the weight loss then brought back the self-esteem and was a critical way to reverse that?
No, taking charge of my life.
You wanted to check the water gas pop over here? Water gas mains right here. Right that way.
The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building was just a huge explosion. And for all companies stand by at the time. Send every available ambulance, everything you got to the World Trade Center now. That's for transmitted for the World Trade Center. Tag 60 for the World Trade Center.
My cameraman's now shooting. It's the first battalion transmitted that looked like it was intentional. It's four more units going into the box. It could be a terror attack. Roll every available ambulance you got to this position.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. CNN Center right now is just beginning to work on this story, obviously calling our sources and trying to figure out exactly what happened, but clearly something relatively devastating happening this morning there on the south end of the island of Manhattan. That is, once again, a picture of one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
on 10-4. That's confirmed. We have fire on several floors, the upper floors of the World Trade Center. 10-4, second one.
We want to tell you what we know as we know it. We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center in New York City. One report said, and we can't confirm any of this, that a plane may have hit one of the two towers of the World Trade Center. But again, you're seeing the live pictures here. We have no further details than that. We don't know anything about what they have concluded happened there this morning, but we're going to find out and, of course, make sure that everybody knows on the air.
These are, of course, the two twin Trade Center buildings that are down at the foot of Manhattan, that they really are the beacons of New York. It was there that there was the explosion a couple of years ago, brought about by terrorists.
It's 8:52 here in New York. I'm Bryant Gumbel. We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
We do have some breaking news that we want to bring you right now. We're going to go to a live picture from New York City. Apparently, a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center in New York. 8:52 with limited information at this point. We don't know about injuries in the building or people on the ground, but obviously this has potential for being a major disaster here. Look at that.
Now remember, there's two World Trade Centers. What we're seeing there is the apparent impact of the plane. It would look to be on the upper 10 or so stories of this, I believe it's a 110-story building. Of the south, it looks like the south of the two towers there in the Wall Street area of New York City. It's responding pictures right there.
All units responding in the box 8087. The staging area will be at West Street, Ted. Call 4 David to Manhattan. You're calling Manhattan. 4 David to Manhattan. Call 4 David, go with your message. Do we have any report on a fire condition yet from on-scene personnel? Position 1 reports,
As Matt just mentioned, we have a breaking news story to tell you about. Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center here in New York City. It happened just a few moments ago, apparently. We have very little information available at this point in time, but on the phone we do have Jennifer Oberstein, who apparently witnessed this event. Jennifer, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, can you please tell me what you saw and give me any information about what's going on there?
Yes, I have to tell you, it's quite terrifying. I'm in shock right now. I came out of the subway at Bowling Green. I was heading to work in Battery Park at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I come out, and I heard a boom, looked up, and there was a big ball of fire.
Can you tell us what kind of an airplane is it?
It had to be a 737 out hit the World Trade Center. It was a big, big plane.
Okay, and what do you see at this point?
Oh, smoke and screaming and, screaming engines and all the fire engines and police departments are all traveling down that way. Oh my God almighty, the black smoke all over the place. I hope there's got to be somebody killed in there, poor people that went to work.
And we're getting reports of a plane crash in the World Trade Center in New York. You can see the pictures there. It's one of New York's tallest buildings. That's all the information we know at the moment, but as you can see, it is a considerable collision and there is a large fire. That's all the information we have at the moment, but we'll be back with more details in just a short while at the top of the hour.
To see what else is going on, and you can imagine the entire building, all of the World Trade Center being evacuated immediately, as well as the area around there. So. This is not a bomb. We understand that a plane, an actual airplane, has crashed into the World Trade Center, tower number 1, building number 1.
you look at an eerie shot there of the Empire State Building to your right and the World Trade Center to the back, with the black smoke billowing out of the top stories of the World Trade Center Tower number 1.
Unbelievable. Homeless is quite apparent there. Unable at this point to see any pieces of plane or anything that maybe...
Pushing our camera into the top of the World Trade Center, and we can see that there appears to be some fairly significant damage to the top of it.
Oh, yes, it's got to be these 15 floors that were hit with the plane.
Tony?
In a few seconds, it was boom. So we ran up to the corner, and there it was, right in the middle of the World Trade Center.
The World Trade Center building had been damaged by this collision. Unbelievable scene, folks. I'm sure you're bringing back memories of what went down.
Transmitted box 8087 on number 1 World Trade Center. Go to message.
You know how close we were just to being killed? I mean, part of that fuselage just could have come this way.
Of Tower 1. We're trying to effort information, folks. This just happened. Again, as Michael just mentioned, CNN is quoting a witness who says that he or she saw a twin-engine plane flying right into the Trade Center.
Fucking plane or something hit the World Trade Center. Something happened at the World Trade Center. It's not good. Mike and I are here. Yeah, we're both standing here. We're looking right at it. It's unfucking-believable. So, you trying to call? Mike, there's a tree falling down from the thing. See it? See it falling?
And I saw the debris. I saw the explosion, the debris, the fiery debris was coming right down in front of our window. I was afraid part of it was going to come into our actual hotel room. There are people trapped up there.
To get information, as we're efforting information, we're trying to reach witnesses who may be there live at the scene and able to give us a first-hand account. Witnesses, we do understand from the Associated Press, reported hearing a huge explosion. On the other side. On her way, talked to her by cell phone. Unfortunately, her cell phone got disconnected. Go ahead.
We're just saying that we're now getting reports from the Associated Press that witnesses reported hearing and seeing that huge explosion, heavy smoke, as you see there billowing from the top.
selfie. Mike, get away from the towers. Oh my God! Oh my God!
That was a person.
The World Trade Center bombing happened in so many years ago that everybody clearly remembers. How about flight rules?
Oh no, there's a person, Tammy. Oh my God!
Oh my God.
Oh. Oh.
Definitely affected by this crash. Black smoke continuing to...
Nixon, hold on just a moment. We got an explosion inside.
The building's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on.
Okay, just put Winston on pause there for just a moment.
The whole building just exploded some more. The whole top part.
Okay.
The building's jam-packed. People are running up the street.
That flight was a large bomber-style green aircraft into the second tower. Be advised. Engine, there's no plane hit the second tower, okay? 10-4.
Jim, yes, just moments ago, as you know, another vehicle on some kind of an aircraft crashed into the World Trade Center. This is no accident. This is no bomb from inside. This is, as you put it, a terrorist attack. There's no two ways about it.
Division 1, be advised. Re-Adam reports that you have a second plane that crashed into the second tower about 2/3 of the way up. He recommends you transmit a 5th alarm for that tower as well.
Yeah, 10-4, go ahead. Proceed with your, okay.
All right, 10-4.
What else can we do?
Don, from everything I can see, it was the same tower that was hit the first time, right?
No, it's the second tower.
It's the other tower.
It is the other tower that was hit.
My mistake.
They targeted it, from what I'm seeing on the television. From your view, the two towers are in, one is in front of the other one, but it was definitely the second tower that was hit.
For the people were just sitting down for a day's work in those buildings.
I did not see the plane go in, but it's horrendous damage.
Thousands of people gathered where I am here at City Hall Park, in front of City Hall, just watching what's going on.
We've been watching live coverage from our affiliate in New York City, WNYW New York, of this unimaginably horrible situation. Now, apparently, a terrorist attack against both of the World Trade Center Twin Towers in Wall Street area of New York City.
Fly into the other Twin Tower?
I heard two explosions, however. There was a first explosion that was louder, and then a second explosion. And but I could not see that. And I looked up, and when I looked up, I saw debris falling, and the tire, as I said, a very large tire.
Well, of course, this is, as we've said, completely shocking video and a shocking turn of events. And we've been talking here that the first incident, one might surmise that it was some kind of accident, and then to have a second, what appeared to be 727 jet, of course, the question of terrorist activity has to surface, and the question of whether this was an intentional terrorist act.
We will have to stay back and cannot get directly over the scene. We will do our best. Holy shit. That is unbelievable. Anybody know what kind of plane it was?
Engine 1 to Manhattan. 1 okay. Engine 1 inform every unit coming to the scene responding on West Street or Liberty Street not to pull up in front of the building. We have ambulances and everybody else pulling up, and we got debris falling from the building. They have to stop short of the building, either north or south.
Building. I was like, am I dreaming or what? I couldn't believe it. It was straight to the building. No, straight to the building.
In the meantime, I can tell you that flames are shooting out of both towers now. The heaviest being on the south tower, the northeast corner of the south tower of the World Trade Center, but there's a considerable blaze going on the north tower as well.
into it. They will not allow us directly over it. They have banned us from the area. Police are asking that we stay back so they can do what they need to do. The initial guess out of the different air towers is that it was a 727 or a 737. It may even have possibly been 2 planes. We're not sure.
Both planes were using the Trade Center as a target. They weren't in trouble. They weren't in distress. They weren't falling from the sky. They aimed for it. And they did a very good job. The Trade Center is torn open. There's a hole in the south side of the Trade Center, torn open from the impact of the plane, which fell into the street below.
Because obviously, because of the nature of this, with 2 incidents, there is the potential that this is a double act of terrorism, and they are worried about other targets.
And we could hear it very low. And walking down the street, a couple of us looked at each other, thinking, what's happening? Then it veered drastically on its side through the buildings and then went into the upper floors of the World Trade Center tower.
Okay, what we can tell you right now from up here in Chopper 4, we cannot get any closer than about 5 miles to the scene because we need to keep this far back. But you can see the black smoke as far as we are away. We can zoom in here for you. First, you saw the smoke from the one tower. Then we witnessed an explosion on the other tower.
Not have TV air, so I can't see anything. Are we going to take? Are we going to do a break-in? Do you want me to talk, or are they just taking visuals?
Have always been, and you may have heard it already this morning, regarded as a prime target for this particular act of terrorism. As you know, there was terrorism at the World Trade Center before 1993. There was a huge bombing attack on the trade centers. These are the 2 at the southwestern corner of the island of Manhattan.
Yes, I understand. How long do you want me to talk?
Prime pieces of real estate of interest to anyone who wishes to hit either New York City or the United States in a very, very visible and vulnerable way.
The American embassy bombers were sentenced here, and one is due still to be sentenced this week, that there could be some kind of revenge involvement, of course, because of this 1993 attack.
Of course, at this stage, it is speculation as to who or what might be behind this attack.
Good morning. You're looking at live pictures of the World Trade Center Tower 1 from Manhattan Lower District. As you can see, we have a very serious fire in the World Trade Center. What we understand, the information is still early in coming, but what we understand is that 2 separate planes have hit Tower 1, which is the tower that you're seeing on your picture right now. As you can see, there are flames. There is a massive fire here at this Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. It's in the upper portion of the building, probably the upper quarter of the tower. Now, of course, the problem with fighting something like this is that it is you can't do an external attack. Firefighters are going to have to go on the inside of this building to actually fight this particular fire. They're going to have to be using things like high-rise packs and standpipe packs. They're going to be setting up a command center here, and they'll be using a cascade system to refill.
Right now, they are trying to determine whether, in fact, it was deliberate. They have no information they can share at the moment, and I get the sense that they're in the same mode that we are, simply their mouth is their gate trying to figure out what's going on.
Jim, let me interrupt for just 1 second. I'm looking at a report that the FBI is investigating reports of a plane hijacking. Did you have any news of that?
No, we don't.
No confirmation of that whatsoever?
We have no confirmation.
Is anybody even there discussing that?
No, the only discussion that's been going on here, Brian, is that the World Trade Center has obvious symbolic value. It's been a target before of terrorism, and frankly, it would not surprise the FBI or anyone in national security if it was a target again.
Sometimes the obvious leads you to a conclusion. We're looking at 2 crashes, 18 minutes apart, into an obvious target, a building that has never been hit with a plane before on a clear day. What do the intelligence people there say about that?
We want to also report that remind people that the World Trade Center bombing that took place on February 26th back in 1993, the product of a terrorist attack, the result of a terrorist attack that killed 6 people and injured more than 1,000. Of course, that happened on a Friday afternoon. I think, Matt, you and Al were working that day.
We were.
I know I was at home in Virginia watching it in disbelief, and now it feels a bit like deja vu, but of course this is so much more bizarre.
Yeah, no question, and you keep in mind that that killed 6 people, injured 1,000, and the explosion happened in a garage in the basement. This was a direct hit on the midsection or upper section of the tower, so the potential for injuries and death much larger. Of course, also some people on the planes.
Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. If they were hijacked and they were en route to a different destination,
right.
Of course, this story continues to unfold.
Express immediately. I-10-4, they're on their way. All units stand by. Units responding into 2 World Trade Center. Respond to West Street and Liberty and see Chief Barbara. Units responding to 2 World Trade Center. Respond to West and Liberty and see Chief Barbara at that location. He is the incident commander at that location. Engine 1-4 to Manhattan. 4, go ahead. Yeah, from the Water Street box, we're stuck in massive traffic. We can't get up to 31st and Madison. I-10-4, engine 1-4. Sign us to the World Trade Center. We're down there. Car 9 to Manhattan. Car 9, get ahead. Car 9, get ahead. Give me the company identifications that are coming into World Trade Center. Just read them down. I-10-4, engine 211, ladder 11. 211. Engine 22, engine 53, engine 40, division 3, battalion 10, battalion 12, ladder 16, ladder 2, ladder 13, engine 221, engine 23, engine 209, engine 212, engine 279, engine 230, engine 229, engine 235, engine 220, engine 216, engine 217, engine 238, engine 214, ladder 12, ladder 118, ladder 7, ladder 24, high-rise 1, battalion 11, engine 74, engine 76, engine 47, engine 58, engine 91, ladder 22, ladder 25, ladder 35, 4 trucks, and ladder 21. Okay, thank you, Manhattan. I-10-4. Manhattan calling the mobile command vehicle, okay? Manhattan calling mobile command vehicle, okay? 230 Manhattan? 230, go ahead. On your frequency, King. I-10-4, you're responding to 2 World Trade Center. Bring all your extra SCBAs to the front of the building with you.
Between us, we are showing you live pictures of the World Trade Centers. As you can see, they are on fire. Both towers. The tower on the left is Tower 1. The tower on your right is Tower 2. We understand that 2 separate planes have hit the World Trade Centers. We are not sure if if there was some kind of technical malfunction.
What happens is there is a particular counterterrorism cell within the Joint Chiefs of Staff that goes into an emergency basis at this point. They're investigating all aspects of air traffic in the area, all intelligence that, as they sift through it, may have given them some indication that something was happening. At this point, though, there were no warnings, they say, this morning. As they go back through this information, they may cull through it and find some clue, but at this point they believe there was no warning.
For those of you who are not in the World Trade Center and watching this down in Lower Manhattan, please turn off your water. Do not use any water you do not need. They will need all the water pressure they can possibly garner at this point. This is a tough place to battle, obviously.
I think I've heard of that. You know, I mean.
It's like a giant hole burning inside. In the first one?
They think it's two air from what we can tell.
They say two airplanes. And they ain't talking about hijack.
Yeah.
What their primary concern right now is protecting the American public in the New York area right now against any possible further attacks by the air. They have no indications there will be, but there is some concern that since this appeared to be such a highly coordinated attack, that there may be other terrorist attacks that could be planned either in New York or elsewhere. This is absolutely the worst case scenario for the counter-terrorist planners because apparently, according to intelligence officials, there were no firm indications prior to this that anything like this could have happened. But in terms of scrambling the U.S. military, it would be for protection for the time being and not necessarily even thinking right now about any kind of retaliation.
Brooklyn Dispatch, urgent. People trapped 5 World Trade on the 80 floor. 3 World Trade. That's the 101 floor and the 102 floor. Manhattan received?
That's a 10-4. Received and acknowledged.
10-4.
Manhattan field com. Manhattan field com, urgent. Manhattan field com.
Division 1-1 to Manhattan.
Division 11.
Yeah, do you have a message for field com?
That's 10-4. We're going to report a people trapped at number 5 World Trade Center on the 80 floor. Number 3 World Trade Center trapped on the 102 and the 101 floors at this time, Kate.
11-10-4. 5 World Trade Center, the 80 floor. 2 World Trade Center, the 102 and 101 floor.
That's a 10-4, Kate.
Field com received that.
10-4 field com.
Ladder 105 to Manhattan, Jay.
Ladder 105.
105 to 1084 at the box.
Ladder 105.
It is one of the tallest buildings in the world. Both of these buildings are. And of course, what we have here is the very top portion of Tower 1 is on fire. You can see the side of Tower 1 is also, it's now the fire is starting to vent out to the side here. There is falling building. There's a lot of glass in this building. There's a lot of other fuel. As you can imagine, if a plane hits a building like this, there is a lot of fuel in both possibly the plane as well as the building. There's a lot.
Prison Chief Barbara, have all of the units responding to number 2 World Trade Center. Report in front of number 1 World Financial Center, which is on the corner of West and Liberty. All units coming into number 2 World Trade Center.
That's 10-4. Attention all units responding into 5th alarm, number 2 World Trade Center. You to respond to number 1 Financial Center, West Street and Liberty Street. Repeating, all units going into number 2 World Trade Center for the 5th alarm. You to respond to West Street and Liberty Street in front of number 1 Financial Center. All units going into the 5th alarm, number 2 World Trade Center. You responded to West Street and Liberty Street. All units going into the 5th alarm for number 2 World Trade Center. You respond to West Street and Liberty Street.
Ladder 19 to Manhattan.
Ladder 19.
1-4 to Manhattan.
You're going to stand by. Ladder 19, your message.
1-4 to Manhattan. Ladder 19 to Manhattan.
All right, Ladder 19, you go. Ladder 19, your message.
Relocating to ladder 16 on your frequency.
10-4, ladder 14.
214, can't respond into box 687 due to traffic. We're stuck by Water Street, the World Trade Center.
10-4.
Fieldcom calling Manhattan.
Fieldcom.
I have MSU activate all their spares, bring all their spares and all spare bottles to the scene of the 5th alarm, number 1 World Trade Center. Okay?
All units, Fieldcom 10-4.
I've just spoken to top U.S. officials with the access to latest intelligence, and they said, quote, that this was clearly terrorist-related, no question about it. They said that they couldn't give any further details now, not because they didn't want to share it, but because they just don't know yet. They're at the earliest stages.
So do they know, Jamie, a plane was in fact hijacked?
They would not answer that, and I think that it's because I think that they just are getting the earliest details and they're afraid of putting out misinformation. But they said, you know, that it was clearly terrorist related.
Wow. Oh my God. It looks like the smoke is thinning a little. It looks like it is thinning a little. I can only hope that means that there are firefighters in the building and are somehow able to put some of this fire out, but it's definitely...
That's why we're not doing cut-ins, because we can't get a signal? Oh my God, those poor people. No, it's Melinda. Okay, I did not know that. All the airports are closed in the New York area?
Given the attacks on the U.S. embassies a couple of summers ago, but a reminder again that as far as international terrorism is concerned and people's anger and even desperation on this occasion with the United States is going to find itself manifest here on U.S. soil. John, here's the president now in Florida. I wonder if everybody knows there what's going on. We'll listen to him.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I unfortunately will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary of Rod Pace and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
I think for safety's sake, I need to get out of here.
Officers are hereby recalled, repeating, by the orders of the citywide tour commander. All off-duty firefighters and all off-duty officers, you are hereby ordered for recall immediately.
4 Charlie to Manhattan, K.
Repeating, Manhattan announcing the call of Manhattan. As for citywide tour commander. All off-duty firefighters, all off-duty officers are hereby ordered for recall. Repeating, orders of the citywide tour commander. All off-duty firefighters, all off-duty officers, you are hereby ordered for recall.
I've spoken to a top U.S. official who says that early reports to our intelligence community and to other officials within the administration are that this was a hijacked American Airlines plane en route from Boston to Los Angeles. One of the 2 planes they say, was apparently a hijacked American Airlines plane. They caution that early reports still need further confirmation, but this is at least what the U.S. government is being told by American Airlines officials, apparently. They are assuming and have obviously informed the president that this is a terror attack.
I don't like being up in this. Do we know who this attack is by?
And therefore, I think all the evidence pointing, as President Bush suggested, towards an attack. And now, of course, people will start to wonder who were the attackers, where did they come from, but very, very early to say at this stage.
Just to remind you, if you've just joined us, we're looking at pictures of the World Trade Center ablaze in New York, the result of 2 planes which flew directly into the Twin Towers, one of the landmarks in New York. It happened at 9 a.m. local time, a very busy time. And this is what one of the eyewitnesses, Jane Beresford, told us.
I was standing down on the Battery Park ferry terminal, just waiting to catch a ferry actually across to Ellis Island, and just heard a huge explosion. It's about 8:30 behind me. I thought perhaps a building was being demolished, but in fact, you saw there were just towers of smoke coming out within minutes. And again, we still thought it was just a building demolished. There wasn't any great sort of panic at that time. And then you saw flames raging through the building, and then approximately sort of 15-20 minutes later, a plane flew down right above us, so very, very close to our heads, and smashed right into the other tower. It's a massive explosion, people were screaming, a sort of panic. There wasn't even many fire ambulances and things like that on the street. It all happened so quickly.
And the emergency services response now?
They are on scene now, but people just seemed to be stunned. There seemed to be nothing happened while this sort of first explosion had happened, and there was sort of this sort of silence and nothing very. And then all of a sudden, all the ambulances and fire engines came down onto the streets, and the most shocking thing was this plane just coming, literally right above our heads and just smashed right into the second building. It's like something out of a film. You just couldn't believe what was happening.
Like that, it just went directly in, creating this sort of cavern-like hole, and suddenly then big flames started protruding from it, and then of course smoke, and then debris started just catapulting. And of course the area that we're in, there's a great deal of foot traffic, and people are just approaching and beginning to just gasp at just the sight of the building itself. Even if they hadn't seen it, the actual incident, the actual impact, just the sight of this huge building engulfed in flame with this massive cavernous hole in the side of it. And we stood there, I can't tell you the amount of time, I would estimate about 15 minutes. And of course there's all kinds of services coming down, fire department and so forth. And then suddenly from my vantage point, which would be north of the building, the far tower suddenly explodes in flames. Yet again, a similar kind of an event, and I now see, I've run down the street to my home where I have the television on, and I saw that too was another airplane. From our vantage point, you couldn't tell what exactly it was that hit the second tower, but it was a similar, seemingly almost like bomb blast, and with flames and debris protruding wildly from the building.
Let's just briefly recap what we know. About an hour ago, about 8:45 Eastern Time, one plane crashed into the tower, the World Trade Center tower on the right, the first of those towers that you can see behind me. And then about a half hour later, a second plane crashed into the tower number 2. That's the one to the left, where the darker smoke is billowing out right now. We have reports, CNN has been told that one of the planes was an American Airlines 767 that had been hijacked from Boston. We don't know if that was the first or the second plane that hit the tower, but we We do know that it was a 767 American Airlines jet. At least that's what CNN has been told by sources so far this morning. We also have reports of 1,000 injuries. That is unconfirmed, and we always remind you in moments like these that as these initial reports come in, it is very early. I can tell you, driving in, it is extraordinarily chaotic on the west side of New York. It is the kind of situation where numbers change, where situations change, but this is the information we have now, that there are at least 1,000 injuries, and we're working on that. As you can see, the smoke billowing out of the Trade Center. In Sarasota, Florida now, Major Garrett joins us. Major, what are you being told?
Hello. President Bush has notified, talked to Vice President Cheney. He has talked to the FBI Director Robert Mueller, and he has also spoken with the Governor of New York, Governor Pataki, about this catastrophe. The President will convene a national security meeting upon his arrival back at Washington. Those are the 4 pieces of information we have gathered here in moments since I just spoke to you on the telephone. The President, as we just saw a few moments ago, identifying this as an apparent act of terrorism against the United States, said there will be a full investigation. The entire apparatus, the United States government, FBI, national security, CIA, the Vice President, who you may remember was placed in charge of a domestic terrorism study group within the White House to monitor and develop plans to deal with a catastrophe of just this kind.
This, unfortunately, is typical. It's only in the movies that you get the advanced warnings. You know, you look at every major terrorist incident against the United States, whether you're talking Pan Am 103, the World Trade Center, the USS Cole bombing, the bombing in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
Rarely do you get an advance notice.
Larry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Jim Miklaszewski has some new information at the Pentagon. I hope you'll stand by and continue to talk with us. Mick?
Katie, I don't want to alarm anybody right now, but apparently it felt just a few moments ago like there was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon. We're on the E-ring of the Pentagon. We have a window that faces out toward the Potomac, toward the Kennedy Center. We haven't been able to see or hear anything after the initial blast. I just stepped out in the hallway. Security guards were herding people out of the building, and I saw just a moment ago as I looked outside, a number of construction workers who have been working here have taken flight. They're running as far away from the building as they can right now. I hear no sirens going off in the building. I see no smoke, but the building shook for just a couple of seconds. The windows rattled, and security personnel are doing what they can momentarily to clear this part of the building. Again, I have no idea whether it was part of the construction work, whether it was an accident, or what is going on. We're going to try to find those details and get them to you as soon as possible. But interestingly enough, one intelligence official here in the building said when he saw what appeared to be the coordinated attack on the World Trade Center, his advice was to stay away from the outside of the building today, just in case. Now again, nobody has any indications of exactly what happened, but it appears that there has been some kind of, it felt like a small blast of some kind. Again, the windows shook, the building shook, the windows rattled, and people, if I'm looking out the window now, and the construction workers are still keeping a good, the construction workers are still keeping a distance. That's all I can see, and I see no other extracurricular security activity right outside. But to get more information, I'm going to have to break away and walk down the hallway and see what it is exactly that happened here just a few moments ago.
Mick, see what you can find.
We are breaking into the special live coverage of what's happening at the World Trade Center in New York to tell you about something going on right here at the Pentagon. You are looking at both pictures. The smoke that you see on the left-hand side of your screen is right here in the Washington area at the Pentagon.
Looks like the helipad area of the Pentagon over towards 395. There were
There were reports of an explosion. People said the
They
building
felt the
shook.
building shake, and they're evacuating that building. We're also getting word that the White House may be under an evacuation order right now. Again, we don't know exactly what happened here at the Pentagon, but you can see the result of whatever it was near the area of the heliport is lots of billowing smoke, dark smoke, and workers reported hearing something and then feeling the area rumble.
Manhattan Cornfieldcom with Nurgent, okay? Proceed, Manhattan Fieldcom. All right, mail hanging from a window near the antenna in Building 1. The floor number? Probably be up on the top floor, okay? 10-4. 0942.
All bridges and tunnels to in and out of the city are closed. The airports are closed. There is a no-fly zone in force over Manhattan right now. Armed military personnel are actually enforcing that no-fly zone. Here's what else I know. World Trade Center each was hit. The first shortly before 9, Tower 1 was hit shortly before 9 a.m. with what appears to be an ATR plane, which is a prop plane. The second tower, which is Tower 2, was hit shortly after that, 18 to 20 minutes afterwards. That they believe was a 727. I have information on the 727, the wingspan, how long it is, how much fuel it carries. I have statements from the president. I know what he said. I know about the times before. I can't. I'm not getting anything up. Oh, it is. The Pentagon's on fire? God, my husband's down there.
So we've got a major fire at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon being evacuated, the White House being evacuated, and we don't know precisely the circumstances there, what caused that decision. And we have these two enormous explosions at the World Trade Center here in New York, where two planes slammed into the buildings. We are also getting reports now that there is a fire on the mall in Washington, that part of the Capitol that runs essentially from the Capitol to the White House.
You see, right, that the Pentagon's been hit too. Turn on CBS.
You said you were on the other side of the border.
Here in New York, sirens everywhere, people out on the streets staring at this grotesque scene of the World Trade Center buildings. It was in February of '93, if memory serves me correctly, that there was an attack, a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. Bomb exploded in the garage of the Trade Center on that day in February of '93. Here we are in the year 2001, and what appears to be deliberate attacks on the World Trade Center. And then we have these two reports out of Washington, the fire at the Pentagon.
The World Trade Center attack seems to be an astonishingly well-planned, a daring and appalling act. Some of the descriptions that I've heard describe the aircraft involved as small passenger aircraft, but it's far more serious than that. The second aircraft that hit the towers which there is film of, which some of your viewers may have seen. That is a Boeing 737. It is not a small aircraft. It's a 100-seat airliner, and obviously a very calculated multiple hijacking plan.
An enormous fireball on several sides of the building. People trying to be evacuated. There's the tape of the second plane hitting right there, even as people were trying to get out of the first building. We have confirmed reports now that there was one plane hijacked, American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles, and that is apparently one of the planes used in this crash.
Of coordinated attacks.
It looks very much like it, yes. An extraordinary amount of, as the defense expert was saying, the aviation expert just then, an extraordinary amount of coordination required to hijack, if that's the case, not one but 3 aircraft and crash them into such high-profile targets.
It's also worth pointing out that terrorism also always has 2 prongs to it, the physical threat and now the psychological threat. This does seem to be surreal, but in fact it is real when you have an explosion of undetermined origin at the Pentagon, the most conspicuous symbol of American capitalism, the Twin Trade Towers here in New York, 2 deliberate attacks on those towers today, and we do not know for sure who is responsible.
SOCOM, K. All right. Building 2, 80th floor. 80 people trapped, Ken. Floor? 804 in building 2. 80 people trapped. 804, 10th floor.
Getting this bulletin. The Federal Aviation Administration has shut down all aircraft takeoffs nationwide. All aircraft takeoffs nationwide have been halted by the FAA.
There are several now incidents that look, for all that we can tell, to be a major terrorist attack here in the United States. So all airports all across the country are closed. All bridges and tunnels coming into Manhattan are closed. The Pentagon has been evacuated or is being evacuated. The White House is being evacuated. The president, who is in Sarasota today to make a speech on education, has spoken briefly to cameras and will shortly make his way back to Washington. They are checking out Air Force One now.
Certainly, what an incredible tragedy. And, you know, all of us in law enforcement and prior in law enforcement have talked for years, and the public has seen the hatred in the world. They've seen the bombing of the World Trade Center. They saw the conspiracy to blow up the tunnels in the United Nations and the FBI building back in the 90s. They've seen the bomb at the USS Cole and the bombings of our embassies in Africa. So, I mean, we've known for some time now that this hatred exists. And And now it looks like that it's culminated in this absolutely horrendous, incredible act.
40, engine 201, engine 228 acting, engine 219, engine 280, ladder 113, ladder 114, battalion 32. All units, you're to respond through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. You're to respond into Albany and West Street. That's for Chief Barber, engine 240.
240, 10-4, and 1084.
Engine 201. Engine 228.
228, Cape.
Responding to the Brooklyn Tunnel, 10-4.
That's affirmative, Cape, 10-4.
Engine 219.
219, 10-4.
Engine
114 to Manhattan, Cape.
Engine 280.
And let's go through the sequence of events. At about 8:45 Eastern Time, a plane crashed into the foremost of those towers that are the World Trade Center. That's Air Force One you see in Florida, the president on board. Obviously extraordinary security around the plane before the president got on, and the president is heading back to Washington. A short time ago, the president made a statement. He said, "Terrorism against our nation will not stand. The government will hunt down those responsible." Mr. Bush said today, "We've had a national tragedy. 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on the country."
Yeah, here's some extra information for you guys. Fire is breaking on the lower floors now. It's starting to spread below where it looks like the plane hit. It could possibly be from the fuel spill, or it could be just that the fire has now started to eat below itself. It's a 757. Holy cow, that's huge. No, I've got a lot of stuff off the other things, though. Major military institutions have all been evacuated. They're evacuating the State Department right now. You know, all airports are closed. Can we stay up?
In case you haven't heard, they hit the Pentagon same way.
Professor Vaiana, with regard to the Middle East, there seems to be a great deal of anger in the Palestinian community over Israel's use of American equipment for this very controversial policy of assassinating, targeting directly and personally Palestinian leaders, where they would use these Apache helicopters that could essentially stand off the targets and then they would fire guided missiles into a vehicle. Is that
or into a building?
Or into
one
a building.
recently into a building,
and
right.
One actually into a car recently. Is this the type of policy that they have felt that would generate this type of anger that could lead to this type of thing? And as we point out, there is no indication at this point of any particular group's responsibility for these attacks.
Well, that certainly is one of the elements. I wouldn't say that it is the determinant reason why all of this is taking place. But certainly I think that the support that the U.S. is giving to Israel, both in politically and economically and militarily, is at the roots of most probably of what is happening here. But I wouldn't just limit it to the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I think that there is the whole issue of the sanctions against Iraq. There is still the whole issue of Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, and other areas where conflict between the U.S. and the Western world and Islam is festering.
Calling field contact. Field contact.
Okay. 86 floor, building 1, room 8617, people trapped. Also, in building 2, 97th floor, we have 6 people trapped.
Field count 10-4. 4-5 to Manhattan.
And you can see the smoke billowing out of the front tower now.
Earlier this morning, that building and that plane going deliberately heading straight into the tower on the left of your screen.
President Bush ordered a full-scale investigation, quoting the president, to hunt down the folks who committed this act.
You know, in terms of responsibility, Tom and Matt and Bob, apparently a senior official from the Radical Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine denied on Tuesday the group had any connection to the plane crash. An anonymous caller had told television that it was behind the crash, but, quote, "I emphasize that the story released on television by an anonymous person is totally incorrect." Tassir Khaled, a senior official from the DFLP Politburo in the Palestinian territories, told Reuters. The DFLP is against hijacking planes and against endangering the lives of civilians who are not connected with the struggle of this region, he said.
There are going to be a lot of claims and counterclaims in the course of the next 24 hours or so. This is a task for investigators of extraordinary magnitude to try to determine who did this.
I hope that don't land on somebody. Well, nobody's gonna be on there. Let's go, people. Let's not stand still now. Keep going towards City Hall. Keep moving towards City Hall. SOD1, City Rochester, SOD1 on there. One of the buildings is partially collapsed, and the whole entire area tank. Transmitting the urgent, identified. Oh my God! A major collapse in one of the towers. Tower, okay. Tower 2. The South Tower, major collapse. 10-4. Banana field com, Kate. Banana field com. Marine 6 to Manhattan. Stand by, Banana field com. Oh! Banana field com. Marine 6 to Manhattan, urgent. Marine 6. Tower 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse surrounding the entire area. Marine 6, 10-4, we were notified, Kate. Banana field com, Kate. Banana field com.
Anthony, the whole second tower collapsed. The whole building is gone. The whole building.
Jesus Christ. You said it, right? I said it. It was burning too much into the uniform.
Daniela, did you hear me? The entire second building collapsed. It is gone. They are letting us stay up. I'm not sure why. Newark is allowing us to stay up. Only the news helicopters are allowed up. The entire country, we're like 5 people in the air. That's it. this additional fire. My husband works right there.
Part of the tower, the second tower, the one a bit further to the south of us, has collapsed. We are checking on that.
Can anybody hear me? I'm a civilian. I'm trapped inside of one of your fire trucks underneath. The collapse check just happened. Stand by, there's people close to you. I can't breathe much longer. Save me. I'm in the camp of your truck.
Hey, person transmitting to Mayday. Where are you, Kate?
I just told you. If you look at the World Trade Center, there's the North Pedestrian Bridge. I think it collapsed when that partial building just collapsed. I was on the street. I don't have much air. Please, help me. 82 I copy that. I'm going to go look for him.
10-4. Manhattan Field Com, urgent case.
I can barely breathe. Please save somebody.
Okay, the person calling for help. Listen to me. You need to calm down and relax. Stand by. We do have somebody on the way. You to maintain air. Get off the air. We do have somebody on the way over to you. You to remain calm. 10-4.
10-4. I'm in the camp of the truck.
10-4. We do have people on the way over there. Manhattan Field Com, urgent case. Stand by. Manhattan Field Com, urgent. Manhattan Field Com. Field Com, go. All right, Manhattan Division 1-1. All right, any other unit call Manhattan? Manhattan Field Com case.
George, have them mobilize the Army. We need the Army in Manhattan.
All right, all units stand by. Everybody try to calm down. Manhattan Field Com case. By Manhattan Division, Manhattan Car 9, urgent. Manhattan Car 9, urgent. By Manhattan, any unit operating at the 5th along West Street and Liberty Street, at tower number 2, any unit case.
Just a few minutes ago, we saw there's a portion of the building where the first plane struck that seemed to be buckling inside itself, almost as if the top of the building was going to fall. Shortly after that, two people, it's hard to tell whether they were being pushed or they physically approached themselves the sort of river side of the building, it would be the west side of the building, and appeared to jump from the top floors, just under where you're seeing the smoke and fire.
That is extraordinary. The South Tower, the World Trade Center, has collapsed. Again, tell me, how long ago was it that you saw this?
This must have been about 5 minutes ago, and prior to that, you could see heads popping out of windows right beneath where that big gaping hole is. So there appeared to be people alive right below where the crash point was, and were trying to find some way out of there. And just as the thing started to buckle, you saw them plummeting from that top floor.
Manhattan, any unit at number 2 World Trade Center. All right, Manhattan, any unit operating at number 2 World Trade Center, urgent.
It's like unbelievable. It's just incomprehensible that that is on fire and that some asshole hijacked a plane and that the whole World Trade Center Tower 2 is gone.
Figure out exactly what has happened, what is at risk, what is not, who is behind it. Are there more explosions, more attacks yet to come? here in New York. The trading on the New York Stock Exchange has been suspended, at least for now. All bridges and tunnels coming into the city have been shut down as police try and clear the way. We can tell you, as we were coming in perhaps an hour ago, there was a convoy, I can't think of a better word, a convoy of fire and police trucks racing down the West Side Highway, and this is in the middle of rush hour. Obviously, every available fire unit here in Manhattan.
I don't mind if you see it.
Now you see it.
Well, were there many people inside the building, or is it just too early to tell where the people were?
Well, there were certainly, probably hundreds, even thousands of people in the building, even though it was before 9 o'clock and the start of the usual work period, because it's just such a large area. So the number of casualties is just enormous, and they're just beginning to sort it out and just starting to get to the first few that they can get to. But the ambulances are just coming in. They're lined up. Every ambulance in New York City has been summoned. They're standing in a queue. They go in as soon as they can get a victim and bring them up here right away.
Bob, we're also looking at the lower end of Manhattan now as a result of the collapse of One World Trade Center. That whole financial district is now engulfed in smoke and debris, and there probably is going to be a lot more smoke inhalation problems as a result of this.
Almost certainly, Tom. I was actually standing and saw that collapse, and everybody here just gasped, and even the medical workers and the ambulance attendants, when they saw that people who are used to tragedy grabbed each other and hugged each other, and some started to cry.
And of course, one wonders about the triage unit.
Exactly, we're close to the base of that building trying to evacuate people, and when a building of that size falls, it does not fall on its own footprint.
No, absolutely. I am, I'm several blocks north of there, so I don't know what that area looks like, but one can only imagine.
Well, the consequences go on, not just to the World Trade Center and to the poor people who were trapped and caught there, but of course that is the heart of the world financial markets, which have now been shut down effectively as well. So the ripple effect continues this morning as we all try to adjust psychologically and intellectually to what we are witnessing here. It is difficult to comprehend, but this country, the strongest country in the world, has been the target of a major coordinated terrorist attack, and the end is not over yet, even if it's confined to just these three targets. The ripple effect goes on. All air traffic has been shut down. There will be no financial markets in place today. Business has been stopped across the country.
And of course, who knows the human toll that will be the result of this action. Matt actually just pointed out to me on any given day, 50,000 people, Tom, work at the World Trade Center.
And at 8:45 in the morning, if they're not in the building, they're around the building. That's a beehive of activity down there. There is no more active area in terms of pedestrian traffic.
I hate to keep going back to the collapse of that tower, but if you consider that this plane hit at mid-structure, and that would have probably taken out the electrical in the building where elevators wouldn't work, and people struggling to get some way out of that tower, and it takes a long time to come down over 100 stories, and to think about the possible loss of life that just occurred by the collapse of that southeastern tower is just amazing. Minna Kathuria is with the Today Show, and she apparently saw the collapse of one of those towers. Minna?
Yes, hi, Matt.
Tell me what you saw.
We're on the corner of Duane and West Broadway, walking down towards the Twin Towers, and it just collapsed. It looked like it looked sort of like the building just demolished. Smoke, clouds, clouds of smoke everywhere. People running towards me. I was going towards the Twin Towers. People were going away from the away from the towers, and it was just people running like I've never seen a scene like it.
Have you, from where you were, Minna, did you see many of the injured being treated? Is there any indication as the type of perimeter that the EMS people were dealing with?
No, I hadn't gotten that close yet. They were sort of blocking off the street. Now what they're doing is totally clearing out the area. and more emergency officials are coming in to help.
Can you just give me an idea of the reaction of people down there, Minna? Just pedestrians?
Everyone in tears. People who were. I met some woman who was in the building to the right of where the first thing happened, and just all crying, wondering if the people that they know in the buildings next door are okay.
They got the FBI, I think, closed down south. It's gone, but that's right.
One second. We have a report now of an explosion on Capitol Hill, and we are checking that out. We have a report of a plane crashing at the Pentagon being evacuated, fire on the mall in Washington, the State Department evacuated.
Anything like this before in the United States, of course, and in fact, not seen anything like this in my recollection. I've been doing this for 30-some-odd years. I don't recall any multitude of attacks. We've had 2 or 3. We've had 2 suicide bombers in a short period of time in the Middle East. We had the 2 embassies in Africa, in Kenya and in Tanzania, the attack 2 summers ago in the United States. But the notion that terrorists, either an organization or organizations, plural, should be able to mount a concerted effort against the United States in this way, causing in this instance so many casualties, in the instance of the trade tower certainly so many casualties, is going to astound people in the political and military and intelligence establishment.
Absolutely. The notion that you could have multiple attacks like this, they had been planning for it, they had not seen it. This is an extraordinary escalation, one that they were predicting would happen, but no one would think that would happen this quickly.
Into play, and is coming into play now.
Why don't you, if you can, stay with us for a little bit.
Sure.
I suspect other questions are going to come up. I want to go through again what we know here at this point, and also point out some things that are not insignificant that we don't know. And one of the things we don't know is we do not now know how many fatalities there have been and how many injuries there are. We can only surmise that this has been catastrophic. A catastrophic event here in New York. Both Trade Center towers hit. One of them appears to have collapsed. How much of it collapsed? These are very large. In any case, we cannot tell you how many injuries, how many fatalities there have been. This is one of those situations that is extraordinarily chaotic. Even in the best of planning, I think it's fair to say that it is chaotic, and officials are trying to do many things at one time. We have on the phone a pilot who witnessed these planes crashing in to the World Trade Center. Sir, can you tell me your name? John, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
John, tell me what you saw.
This morning we were at Midtown Manhattan in a 31st floor of a building facing south. We saw a 767 flying low down the center of Manhattan Island heading towards downtown Manhattan. At about maybe 20 blocks north of the World Trade Center, we saw the plane veer to the left and fly directly into the north side of the South Tower.
Gentleman just said, a dark day. It is a dark day.
We also do have some confirmation and more specifics now on what we had been reporting about the possible collapse up in New York City, one of the World Trade Centers, but it's being described now as a partial collapse, and of course...
You were in the World Trade Center when either this or these attacks occurred, am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It was, I guess it was slightly before 9 o'clock, and I work on the 36th floor in One World Trade Center. I work in the insurance industry. Probably hundreds of people in my industry in both of these 2 buildings.
And what happened?
As I was...
Hey, Dennis, just let me stop for a second. Somebody is trying another telephone on this line. Could they please not do that while we listen to Mr. Cross? Thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Cross. Go ahead, Dennis.
Essentially, I was, sort of at my desk working, general office activity, and felt an enormous. It almost felt like an earthquake. Like I could literally feel and see things in the office moving and the floor moving. Immediately after it was some sort of explosion or something. There was an enormous volume of debris and paper. It almost looked like a dirty parade. All of this material just falling down. I was looking out the south side of One World Trade, and everybody in the office was kind of screaming, kind of gathering in the middle. And I went to the window, and I immediately saw one woman who appeared to be motionless, laying on the roof of a lower building next to me. At that point, everybody started to gather their things. They were trying to evacuate people down the stairwell.
Did the electricity go out in the building?
The lights flickered a couple of times, and then it was weird. It was kind of like there was one sort of rush, and then shortly after that there was another one. I don't know if it was maybe the other tower or if it were elevators in the inside. Sort of just dropping to the floor.
Are you aware that one of the Twin Trade Towers has now collapsed on itself?
Yeah, I'm about probably 5 blocks from there on the corner of Greenwich and Warren.
And as we looked at it on the screen here, Dennis, we could see the smoke from this collapse just billow forward through the lower blocks of Manhattan. Did you have a sense of that?
Completely. I was at that point. I'm a little bit northwest, certainly north, maybe to the west side of Tower 1, and I was trying to get to Broadway. My wife works on the other side of downtown here, and I'm still trying to get there, but the smoke, I couldn't see. It was a wall of smoke, and if you were in it, you couldn't see. If you were out of it, you could just see the wall of smoke. It was
how
never
difficult?
seen anything.
I'm sorry for interrupting. How difficult was the evacuation?
I'm sorry, say that again, Peter?
How difficult was it to evacuate the building from at least from the 30? There were 110 stories in the building.
I would say that it wasn't extremely difficult. It was just slow going down a somewhat narrow stairwell. If there was any sort of people who weren't able to move quickly, then it literally slowed down or stopped everybody. I was on 36, so it wasn't too terrible. When I got down to the 15th or 12th floor or so, there was water coming in from the doors, kind of at our feet level, and then it just was a waterfall continually down all of the stairs, probably, in some cases 3-4 inches deep. At that, sirens and alarms were going off, and then people started to get a little frantic there.
Dennis, thank you very much.
Okay,
I really appreciate you calling in.
You're very
Dennis
welcome.
Krause, who works or did work on the 36th floor of the World Trade Center.
First one went off, and then 10 minutes later, this just blew up out of nowhere.
Hard to think that would just be accidental.
No, I don't think it would be accidental.
Back it up, folks. Back it up.
Kenny Johanneman.
Spell your name.
Johannemann.
And you were working there?
Yes, I was right there.
Eyewitness
I was down in the
telling what he saw, a huge fireball at the World Trade Center as 2 planes slammed into the side of these twin towers in the bottom of Manhattan. The security personnel were trying to move them along. The streets of New York are being cleared, possibly for fear that the second twin tower will come down. Earlier we saw one of the towers collapse in an enormous thud of debris and smoke. It's an extremely dangerous situation still in the scenes in the streets of New York.
What's happened this morning? Give me your read.
Well, our lives will never be the same again. This will change everything we do in this city and everywhere else around here. This is the day that we will all remember until we die now. I can't even imagine anything more worse than what's going on right now. The terror is just unspeakable.
Basically what we probably have, Mr. Jenkins, is what, 3 hijackings and then the terrorists plowing to the World Trade Center and the Pentagon?
That's correct. Just the enormity that somebody would do something this awful to innocent people, there's no cause that can justify this. Everything about aviation will change, and even the Pentagon was under attack, and there's smoke coming from this. So whatever airports have been in the past, in terms of nightmarish getting through, the nightmare is only beginning because travel will become unspeakably difficult now.
What happened to airport security, sir?
I have no idea how any of this happened. We have no details at this time. I'm sure, though, that all resources will be brought to bear on this. In the future, getting through any airport will be very, very difficult. It will not be pleasant ever again.
I think you said it best, though, at the beginning. Our lives will never be the same. Everything will change after this.
Everything will change everywhere in this city and in just about everything that I do in commercial aviation.
Mr. Jenkins, I can remember years back. It was D.C. Police Chief Maurice Cullinane, Jerry Wilson, Isaac Fullwood. They all said someday terrorism is going to come to the United States.
Well,
I think today it did.
Today it did, and like we said earlier, our lives will never be the same.
Senior law enforcement officials in Washington now tell us that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. That's it's a report now from the Associated Press, about to confirm it with our own people at the State Department, though everybody in Washington has been evacuated from their buildings. But a car bomb has now exploded outside the State Department. And John Miller, I see you writing quite frantically on something else.
It's at the scene now at the World Trade Center. Because of the concerns of the structural stability of the remaining tower, a temporary headquarters mobilization point triage center was set up at Stuyvesant High School, which is about 2.5 blocks up and slightly across the street. Now the concern is that if the building falls, if the second building falls, that it will be falling in that direction. So they are now evacuating their own command post and triage center, and they have to find an even further zone to move that to. Something that is striking about this today is that this is indicative of, with a car bomb at the State Department, a plane crash into the Pentagon, 2 planes designated to crash into each tower of the World Trade Center, bringing one down. It connotes the level of planning and sophistication and extreme logistical ability that probably makes this singularly the largest, most well-coordinated act of terrorism, not just in U.S. history, but probably
certainly in modern times.
In modern times.
The other towers just collapsed. Ready to collapse. Ready to collapse. Oh, those poor people. Oh, 10-4 on your urgent.
I hope I live.
09 acting. 3-3 to Manhattan. Acting to Manhattan. Urgent. 289 to Manhattan. Urgent. The World Trade Center's collapsed. Building 2 has collapsed. Okay. Urgent. Unicorn urgent case. Somebody get out. We had a collapse in the second tower. Everybody's running from there. This is here it comes. Get in. Hold on. 10-4. Attention all units. We're receiving reports of number 1 and number 2 World Trade Center collapse. All units at the scene receiving reports. Number 1 and number 2 World Trade Center both towers collapsed.
Just to recap, if you're just joining us around 8:42 Eastern Time.
I mean, they're gone. They're just gone.
Crashed into the right twin tower of the World Trade Center.
It goes inside.
Blowing off the camera. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help. I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Can I get a toot? I'm just need a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay, back to you. This is the car I hid behind. It saved my life. Oh, wait, maybe it was this one.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs some oxygen if someone can share it with him.
10-4.
Thanks.
We have a medical emergency, possible heart attack, fireman. We're on the bulkhead as requesting oxygen for the firemen. Okay, any unit, hear me, come to the bulkhead on the Hudson River side of the World Trade Center.
I can't do very much because I can't see. My eyes are full of stuff. I got oxygen from a fireman for a while. I don't know how safe it is here. Do any of these buildings could go down. Do you have an extra mask?
No, I just gave it out. You all right, though?
Yeah, I'm good. See if we can help anybody.
Well, you need fuel, right? So we gotta go to somewhere.
There's just a hole where the buildings were.
Everything south of the Brooklyn Bridge is in a dust cloud. No visibility. People all over the street. Travel is near impossible.
Just semi-staging area. That's what I'm doing.
So
Donald Trump is on the line. I mean, we know him as the man behind lots of real estate in Manhattan. And of course, Donald, I understand you were actually a witness to what happened this morning.
Well, I have a window that looks directly at the World Trade Center, and I saw this huge explosion. I was with a group of people, and I really couldn't even believe it. And even, I think worse than that, for years I've looked right directly at the building. I'd see the Empire State Building in the foreground and the World Trade Center in the background, and now I'm looking at absolutely nothing. It's just gone, and it's just hard to believe.
Donald, Alan Marcus here. Your building is, the Trump Tower, is one of the great tourist attractions in the world. It's well known universally. Are you taking any precautions there in light of what happened at the World Trade Center?
Well, Alan, we've always had, as you know, very, very strong security, but there's very little you can do about planes crashing into a building. I mean, you look at Larry Silverstein, who's a terrific owner in New York and a very good friend of mine who I just called. I was very worried about him because I assumed maybe he was in the building. He took possession of the building 1 week ago. As you know, he just bought the World Trade Center.
Right.
And he was in his office, and he was getting ready to move into the World Trade Center over the next 2 weeks. So when I just spoke to him, there's nothing you can do when people are going to be bombing planes at your building. Now, I guess maybe the world is going to be changing, and maybe you're going to have F-16s flying all over the city, etc. But it's a pretty tough situation.
Donald, you have one of the landmark buildings down in the financial district, 40 Wall Street. Did you have any damage, or did you know what's happened down there?
Well, it was an amazing phone call I made. 40 Wall Street actually was the second tallest building in downtown Manhattan, and it was actually, before the World Trade Center, was the tallest. And then when they built the World Trade Center, it became known as the second tallest, and now it's the tallest. And I just spoke to my people, and they said it's the most unbelievable sight. It's probably 7 or 8 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and yet Wall Street is littered with 2 feet of stone and brick and mortar and steel, and there are thousands of people walking over the debris over the Brooklyn Bridge, where they're sending them out over the Brooklyn Bridge to Brooklyn, and then I guess they're going to have to figure out how to get home from there. But they have between 1 foot and 2 feet of debris right in front of a building that's probably, you would say, Alan, 6 or 7 blocks away.
Donald, this is Roland Smith.
Hi, Roland.
You know, how you doing on this kind of day? You know, at some point we're going to put all this behind us, and you, as a visionary, particularly in New York real estate, what do you think that we ought to do as a city, as a people, when all of this gets, when the mourning stops, when the dead are honored, and we've found out what caused it and maybe corrected it? What does the city need to do?
Well, I guess the big thing that you really will have to do is never forget. You just can't forget that something like this happened. I was so disappointed when they closed the stock exchange, but of course at some point you had no choice, you know, when they initially announced it was closing, because you want to just say, the hell with it, you're going forward, nothing's going to change. But the fact is something has changed very dramatically. And I think one of the very sad things is going to be when you look at the skyline of New York, which has become so emblazoned in your own memory, and you look at the skyline of New York and you see these buildings, these 2 buildings, whether you love them or don't love them, they were a great part of the skyline. And then when you look at the skyline after 2001, and you're going to see a skyline without these 2 buildings, you're going to say, what happened? People won't believe it. You know, when you show your children or your grandchildren in years to come what New York looked like in the year 2000, and then what New York looked like just a year later, they're going to say, what happened?
Hey, Donald,
it's hard to believe.
In the year 2000, Donald, you considered running for president. If you had done that and if you had been successful, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
Well, I'd be taking a very, very tough line, Alan. I mean, you know, most people feel they know at least approximately the group of people that did this and where they are. But, boy, would you have to take a hard line on this. This just can't be tolerated, and it's got to be very, very stern. This is, as you and I were discussing before, Alan, this was probably worse than Pearl Harbor. Many more people are dead, and you know, they don't know, they have no idea, but I have somebody that was down there who witnessed at least 10 people jumping out of the building from 70 and 80 stories up in the air. I mean, you probably have 25 or 30,000 is the number I've heard, but I would think would be much more than that, I think the most of the damage will be caused not by even in the building in terms of the people dead, but by the people on the streets from falling debris.
Donald, you're probably the best known builder, particularly of great buildings in the city. There's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation, and it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid, and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows, you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid. And, you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
Very profound statement and very true.
Donald, one last question for you. Given the magnitude of how much of American commerce took place within the Twin Towers, what do you, as you're an expert on this, what do you think is going to be the fallout over the next several weeks, months, and even years, given what we have lost in terms of those buildings going down and all that was within it?
Well, I, as an example, Alan, and you might use them too, but I have an insurance company that was on the 102nd floor of the World Trade Center. They're gone. I don't know who's gone. I don't know anything other than their offices are no longer there. They're wiped out. The Morgan Stanley Group, you know, Morgan Stanley, a big, powerful firm, they had 50 stories in the building, gone. I mean, you're talking about some firms that are just gone. Now, Morgan Stanley, in that case, had a lot of its offices in Midtown, and they had about half downtown. Morgan Stanley's a big, powerful firm. They're gone. Many firms had all of their offices, as you know, in the World Trade Center. It was 8 million square feet. 8 million square feet is the size of some cities. And we had 8 million square feet in the world, 4 million in each building. They were huge buildings, not only in height, but, you know, each floor was 50,000 feet. They were monstrous floors. Each floor was almost a city in itself, and they had 110 floors or so. So, you know, many firms that were easily recognizable for those of us in the financial worlds, for those of us that read the papers and see the financial pages, they're going to be gone. I mean, they're just not going to exist anymore. They're gone.
Donald Trump.
Many of the people are gone with them.
Donald Trump, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you
we
all.
really
Good luck.
appreciate it. Thank you.
And
Same
you too.
to you.